before we end, let's finish off with a leadership lesson from Luke. This is going to be a slightly different one today. It's not a particular passage that we're going to talk about. It's the entire book. Because as Dr. Rod and I were discussing all of these points today, we felt that there was an overarching theme in here where it was actually what we believe is part of that issue of substance and part of the issues that we've been discussing today, that Luke was written different. Well, Luke was an apostle. And so the book of Luke and obviously Acts was written differently. Dr. Rod, you had a good revelation about this that I'd love for you to share about how we can learn to become better leaders because of the way Luke, the book, was written in line with what we've been discussing today.
Well, it might come as a surprise to some people, but Luke wasn't actually an eyewitness to the things that he wrote about. He was a Gentile. Many authors say he was, in fact, a physician. But one thing is very clear, he did his research carefully. Now, he did not actually write everything that he discovered during his research. He talks about many other things. So he chose to present those things which were going to be most impactful to his intended audience. It certainly appears that his intended audience was Greek, particularly the educated Gentiles of the day. So he knew his audience, he did his research well, and he wrote for his audience. So that in itself, I think, is an important lesson for leaders. Do your research well, know who your audience is, and write or communicate for your audience. But also, you see, the Jesus that he portrayed was a Jesus who was very committed to his own assignment. And Jesus, in the way Jesus is portrayed in the book of Luke, he very strongly, two things. One is he cares enough for his disciples to spend a lot of time and effort teaching them. So he modeled the discipler.
Yes.
As leaders, to a large extent, we're disciplers, in the Christian context. He himself modeled the role of discipler because he took a lot of time and effort to teach his disciples. When they asked him questions, he took the time to answer. The other thing that Luke focuses on very much is the way in which Jesus helped the poor, the needy, and the sick. His message was, to some extent, I suppose, political, because Jesus had very little time for the religious leaders of the day who were extracting wealth from people who were really too poor to pay. The way the whole system was rigged, it was rigged in favor of the higher echelons of the priestly class. I didn't certainly cover all of most of the priests, by the way, only served periodically, and really they had no form of sustenance when they weren't serving. And so most of the priests were very poor people. They were being exploited as well. And the average person was very poor. Around about a quarter of the population were actually living below starvation levels. So times were pretty tough. And Jesus addressed the needs in the context of the time. And I think there's a lesson there for those of us who are in politics as well. We need to focus on those people who are actually being left behind, as it were, by the system. And I think one of the sad things for me about modern politics is that it seems to be geared towards the interests of the professional political class. Not to the interests of those who are actually being left out by the system. And my view of the Bible, as you know, I'm an economist, I've got a PhD in economics, I've been an economics lecturer for virtually 40 years, and I'll probably get back into it in the next year or so. Um, my understanding of the Word of God is that it's very strong on the need to be diligent workers. It's strong on the definition and protection of private property. So, if you like, biblical economics is pretty much the story of capitalism. However, it's also very strong on our responsibility for those who kind of fall out of the system. The Old Testament and the New Testament, to some extent, they focus on the widows and the orphans and the sojourners. And, they were kind of left out of the system back in those days. They didn't have any inheritance. They had no way of providing their own sustenance and so on. And there's much said about our need to look after the poor. And I think one of the things we can learn, particularly if we have an interest in politics, take a lesson from Luke, focus on those who are being squeezed out by the system, even if it's a good system. And I don't really talk about capitalism anymore. I prefer to talk about biblical economics. And biblical economics is strong on individual responsibility. It's strong on entrepreneurship and on innovation. It's strong on market mechanisms, and I could spend 2 or 3 hours talking about that. But it is also strong in looking after those who, for any reason, have fallen out of the system and the whole system isn't looking after them. That's what we need to focus on in politics. And I think one of the lessons we could take from these midterm elections is that it's not good enough to simply say the ones who are in power are not delivering. You need to be able to show we really care about those who need helping, and this is how we're going to do it. So Jesus both demonstrated his role as discipler, but he also took the context of the time in which he actually lived on earth, and he tackled the issues head on. He looked after the poor and needy, and he instructed us to do that as well.
Yeah, that's good. Obviously, the best example we can ever learn from for leadership is Jesus. I believe
that's right. Yes.
with no doubt, and it's not a Bible, it's not a Sunday school answer, of like Jesus is the answer. It's like, no, if you actually look at the way that he discipled, that he built people up around him, that he served community, that he served his team, he was a man of substance, was a deity of substance. Obviously, he had a lot more substance than all of us because he was the substance of God as well. So, but from the practical standpoint of his leadership was he saw the problems. Let's kind of like, what we spoke about today is he was analytical. He wasn't just critical. He addressed problems, but he provided a solution for it as well. He knew when to step back from the team and just allow the team to do their thing, and he knew the time to step in and correct the team or take charge of the team. He also knew that it wasn't about him and his glory. It was all about, obviously, the glory of the Father, but he was there to protect his team and not take the glory from the team. And he had substance. Like, that's kind of the summary of today of what you were just sharing there with how Luke himself wrote with substance. He was very detailed. He was very researched and obviously Luke is a longer gospel than the rest because he applied more substance and more detail and research to how he presented, and obviously he presented the story of how Jesus, we as political leaders, but also as leaders, need to learn that we're here to be able to help those people that are that are marginalized, those people that don't have a voice, those people that are in need, as Dr. Rod shared. Dr. Rod, thank you. Midterms. It's provided us quite a substantial conversation today, which is interesting. Do you have any last comments about the midterms and how we as leaders can learn from this and become better leaders?
Well, I suppose, the final comment would have to be, let's not look towards what's happening in this temporal world, but let's look toward eternity as leaders. And, we might be disappointed by the outcome of the midterm elections. That's one level, and, it's okay to be disappointed, but let's keep our focus on Jesus.
Yeah.
Let's understand that, as David Jeremiah says, let's not focus on the end of the world, but focus on the world at the end.
Yeah.
All of us who are Christian leaders, we've still got a role to play. Let's keep loving our people. Let's keep leading our people. Let's keep ensuring that the focus is not on us. Let's maintain the vision, and let's continue to disciple those who are our followers.
That's great. And guys, remember, whatever the results of any election, wherever you are in the world, at the end of the day, remember, there's only one person sitting on the throne. There's only one person that is in control. Well, I say person loosely, God. No matter who is president, no matter who is governor, no matter who is prime minister, no matter who is our local councillor, at the end of the day, God is still on the throne. God is still in all sovereignty, in all control of the world. We need to continue to place our faith in God, not in man. No president, no governor is going to save us. No prime minister is going to save us individually. There's only one who saves. Jesus saves, and he's sitting on the throne. And so please remember that these things, as Dr. Rob mentioned, all these things happen in a temporal home. That keep our eyes cast on eternity, but also remember that these results, they may not be the results that we're wanting. We may still have to deal with a whole bunch of Marxist agendas or whatever to be opposed with. But God said we'd always face opposition. He didn't say it'd be a walk in the park. Let's make sure we keep our faith in God and trust that He is the one that will protect us and guide us and will come soon. But let's not lose sight on our purpose and the time until He comes. Hey, that was an excerpt from our On the Cube Leadership podcast. If your leadership has been challenged, helped, or you've gotten a new revelation around your leadership, give it a thumbs up, and we'd love to hear your comments below. And hey, if you want to see more content like this, check out our channel and consider subscribing.